everyone, welcome back. You can see I have a computer in front of me, and that's because I'm doing a skincare reaction, but to one of my old videos. This is my pregnancy skincare video from just about like 3.5 years ago. I was pregnant with my second child, and we have so much more updated information, so I'm gonna react and share that information. So it's kind of crazy to look back on a video like this because one, it wasn't that long ago that I was pregnant. I also look a little bit different. What's funny is, you know, lately people are like, you look so different. It's like, well, because you guys saw me for like 5.5 years straight being like pregnant and breastfeeding and pregnant and breastfeeding. And so of course I looked a little bit different, but also everything that I kind of thought about skincare and what I couldn't use and what I should use has completely changed. And I think one of the best trends we've seen on social media in the past couple of years is that there are more dermatologists and just doctors, like OBGYNs even, that are on social media and they're sharing updated information. And I think that that is so refreshing. So for this video, I'm gonna take you through my old pregnancy skincare advice, but I also reached out to a couple of dermatologists that I just love. That is Dr. Lindsey Zubritsky and also Dr. Jenny Liu. Both of them are on social media. They both have their own babies and have been either recently pregnant or are currently pregnant, and they really are in it and they're sharing much more updated information. I also encourage you to go watch Dr. Sam Ellis, who I've had on the channel a few times. She recently had a baby of her own, and I feel like she shares so much more updated skincare information that pertains to either pregnancy and breastfeeding. So there's definitely a wealth of knowledge now out there, and it's honestly so refreshing to see that we were getting a lot of it wrong, and there is just so much more that we're able to use when it comes to skincare. All right, let's go ahead and get started. This is fun. This is kind of exciting. It's also very scary to look back sometimes, but let's go for it. Hey everybody, I have a big announcement today. You might have seen it on my personal channel, but if you didn't, I am pregnant. Number 2 is coming, and with that means that I have to give up certain ingredients in my skincare, certain treatments, and I feel like I get questions all the time on what you should avoid when you're pregnant, so we're gonna talk about that today. So you heard me say that, you know, just right from the get-go, that there are so many ingredients that you have to give up. I'm gonna tell you right now, watch this video with me, because I'm gonna tell you there are so many more ingredients that you actually can use or that are like technically safe during pregnancy, but even more so during breastfeeding. So definitely keep watching. When you're pregnant, a lot of things start to change. It's like the understatement of the year. It's like a lot of things start to change. Everything changes when you're pregnant. Some people end up getting amazing, beautiful, clear, glowy skin. We talk about that pregnancy glow. Some people get terrible acne. They get hyperpigmentation. That tends to be what I get. I'm already starting to get a lot of melasma. And the reason for that is because your hormones are shifting. So they sometimes say, and you know, I don't know how much truth there is to it, but they say when you get breakouts and you get a lot more melasma, that you're potentially having a girl, because then you're getting double the estrogen hormones, and then when your skin clears up and you look really pretty, you're having a boy because you're getting some balance with like the testosterone. So that's, you know, some people say it's like a myth, but no matter what, your hormones are acting different when you're pregnant, and that does cause your skin and your hair to act differently. So there's a lot of beauty stuff that happens with pregnancy. As far as melasma, the problem that you've probably heard me talk about for years at this point, I always had a little bit of hyperpigmentation and melasma, but it really started to become a big deal for me when I got pregnant for the first time and got progressively worse throughout both of my pregnancies and breastfeeding. Dr. Jenny Liu said that it is reported in about 50 to 75% of pregnancies. So that means that that large of a group of women are experiencing melasma while they are pregnant, which is really wild to think. And she also says that they think it's due to hormones and the hormonal changes, but it's still pretty unclear. And I think that's one of the biggest issues with melasma, is that one, when it's due to hormones, it's hard to control that, especially while you're pregnant, because you're having such shifts in your hormones, and they're necessary ones to be able to keep a baby healthy and safe. But two, you know, there are just so many other factors that you can't really pin when it comes to what's making your melasma worse. This is also why we know that you should be wearing your sunscreen and everything too. As far as what Dr. Lindsey Zubritsky says about melasma during pregnancy, I mean, she really does say that hormones definitely play a big role in the melasma, because you are getting so many fluctuations in your estrogen and your progesterone. Other skin conditions that you can also get during your pregnancy and breastfeeding are conditions like acne, eczema. You can get, you know, like dry patchiness from your pregnancy. We all know about stretch marks, which you know, sometimes you can't even avoid during your pregnancy. And then you can also get benign skin growths, which I did not know during my first pregnancy. So when I started getting like a couple of like skin tags here and there, especially because they showed up in weird places like under my arms, these are weird things that happen due to your hormones. As far as the gender of your baby affecting the types of hormones that you're getting, the fluctuation, Dr. Lindsey Zubritsky says it's just an old wives' tale, which I kind of suspected, but it does seem interesting to think that like maybe if you're having a girl, you're getting a little bit more estrogen, or if you're having a little boy, you're getting more testosterone, but apparently this is not true. You also have to give up certain treatments and certain ingredients, and that can also have an effect on your skin and your hair. So let's talk about those now. Starting with ingredients, one of the big ones for me is that you have to give up retinol and retin-A. So all retinoids have to go. That one is probably one of the hardest for me because I live for retinol. You guys have heard me talk about retinol. Retinol is kind of like the gold standard in anti-aging. I use it in my skincare routine all the time. And so to give it up is really a big bummer to me. If you don't know why you have to give up retinol, it's a really strong ingredient. Retinol is a vitamin A derivative. Retin-A is a vitamin A. It's very strong. They don't know, they've never really had the ability to do research on pregnant women about the effects of retin-A and retinol on a fetus, but they do know that it's such a strong ingredient that it could potentially have toxic properties to a child and to a fetus. So they want you to avoid that usually when you're pregnant or when you're breastfeeding. Okay, so when it comes to retinoids, I still fully believe it's one of the hardest ingredients to give up while you're pregnant. And I think across the board, everyone agrees that you should still give up retinoids while you're pregnant, topically and of course orally, and that is your isotretinoin. That said, when it comes to breastfeeding, a lot of people believe that you can go ahead and get back on your retinoids, which is such a relief because I actually did avoid using retinol when I was breastfeeding my first child. But now we know that one of the biggest reasons why you're told to give up retinoids while you are pregnant is due to the dangers of oral retinoid use. And this is your Accutane, your isotretinoin. This is your pure vitamin A. When you take that orally, it's definitely risky for your fetus. It can cause birth defects. And since we know that orally it can cause birth defects, they tell you to avoid it topically as well, just to be on the really safe side because you just don't know. And so while you are pregnant and the fetus is actually growing and developing, then you want to go ahead and avoid retinoids. And this includes your retinol and your tretinoin, your prescription retinoids. So all of your retinoids, you want to avoid them while pregnant, but while you're breastfeeding, it's totally safe. And actually recently I was talking to Dr. Sam Ellis, who has been breastfeeding her new baby, and she said that she pretty quickly started to use her tretinoin after having her baby. So I think she waited a couple of months and then she got back onto her tretinoin. So it's such a relief to hear that, you know, once you're breastfeeding, the baby is out, you're good to use your retinoids. All right, let's move on to the next skincare ingredient I'm probably going to tell you to avoid, and then maybe you don't actually have to. While you're pregnant or while you're breastfeeding are salicylic acid, your BHAs. Salicylic acid, BHA, which is basically interchangeable. It's basically the same thing, BHA or your salicylic acid. So this one is actually surprising to me. I avoided salicylic acid throughout both of my pregnancies and also while I was breastfeeding because I thought it was something you could not use during pregnancy. I was always told you can't use it. I was always told it's because of aspirin, because it's like the same kind of ingredient as aspirin, and so, you know, you can't take aspirin or Advil while you're pregnant because you can cause problems to your baby as well, which is all stuff that, you know, like I guess this is like a game of telephone. Like it all just kind of trickles through. I think a lot of the time when people are giving you advice of what to avoid while you're pregnant, and this is like even the stuff that they tell you to avoid as far as like food goes and everything too, I think a lot of the time they're just taking the stance of let's be better safe than sorry and go really strict with what you avoid versus like kind of being in the middle or a little bit more loose about it and then having any kind of risk, because why do you want to risk it, right? So I want to point that out. Like a lot of the time, I think it's like all well-meaning information when people are telling you to avoid things, but I know from personal experience, it's really hard to tell a person that they have to basically avoid everything. That said, Dr. Lindsey Zubritsky says that it's still debatable whether salicylic acid is safe during pregnancy, and both her and Dr. Jenny Liu agree that if it's under 2%, that it's probably fine, and they suggest using it in either just a spot treatment. As far as Dr. Jenny Liu goes, she says spot treatment or cleanser, something that's wash off, and Dr. Lindsey Zubritsky also agrees that it's best used in a wash off. But really the big thing to point out here is that they're telling you to only use it at 2% or less and to use it mostly in a wash off product. So they're really saying just don't overdo it with the salicylic acid, but keep in mind that it is still a little bit debatable. You want to avoid willow bark, and you want to avoid anything aspirin related. Your doctor will actually mention the aspirin to you, and the reason for that is those are also known to cause birth defects. So again, you're just kind of going down the safe route. If you happen to use a product that had salicylic acid in it recently and you're pregnant, or you used a retinol, I wouldn't freak out. I think it's more of like the prolonged use of these products while you're pregnant or breastfeeding that can get a little bit dangerous and a little bit iffy. So you just want to make sure you are always looking at the ingredients that you're using, and also run them by your doctor. If you have like this skincare routine that you've been using and you found out you're pregnant, run some of the ingredients by your doctor. It's usually the active ingredients that can pose a danger, so you just want to run those by them, get it cleared, and you're good. Honestly, that's like what it comes down to. As far as the skincare ingredients like willow bark, we're starting to realize, like that it's more of a derivative. Is it really salicylic acid? That even falls into a lesser territory of being dangerous as far as your pregnancy goes. But again, like I said in this video, you want to check with your doctor. That's the best bet. I get DMs all the time, and unfortunately you might have a conservative doctor who's like, no, I suggest you just avoid everything. And you really can't fault a doctor like that either, because for doctors, they're gonna go the safest route possible, and that's partially for their own safety too, because they don't want to give you advice on, ingredients or something that there isn't a lot of information out there for, and then risk, like putting you in danger and then something happening and then also then getting in trouble themselves. So a lot of the time when the doctors are giving you this advice, it's really because there's just no information out there. They can't do any ethical studies on pregnant women, so they can't really tell you yes or no because there's no evidence to suggest it. So a lot of the time it's just easier to say, let's go extra conservative. But really, even if you watch my video, even if you watch a doctor's video online, it's always best to check with your own doctor, because they also know what's going on with your health. And I think that's also very important, because all of this is personal, and just because I'm giving you generalized information that I'm getting from dermatologists, it doesn't mean that it pertains to you. Another really powerful ingredient that a lot of pregnant women would potentially want to use, but is dangerous, is hydroquinone. I mean, hydroquinone is already like on one of those like iffy lists for people. A lot of people, you'll talk to some people and they're like, I absolutely won't use hydroquinone because it's way too iffy of an ingredient because it's really strong. Some people consider it toxic. So you want to just avoid hydroquinone while you're pregnant and breastfeeding as well. Even though it can really help with melasma, you're just gonna have to deal with that afterwards, or go with glycolic acid. You can definitely use glycolic acid. Just run it by your doctor, always be safe, but I always stick with glycolic acid when I am pregnant, and that's how I try to minimize my melasma. All right, so when it comes to hydroquinone, the information out there is still true that you have to avoid it while pregnant and also while breastfeeding. And the reason for that is because both Dr. Jenny Liu and Dr. Lindsey Zubritsky say it has a high systemic absorption rate. Dr. Zubritsky says it's greater than 30%, and Dr. Jenny Liu says it is about 40% absorption rate, systemic absorption rate, which essentially means that it has a higher rate of getting into your body and into your system. And while Dr. Jenny Liu says there are no studies out there that have shown it causing harm in animal studies, they still don't really know, right? They haven't, again, there are no ways to ethically test pregnant women and hold those kinds of studies, so they really don't have that information. And since they know that it has that higher absorption rate when it comes to skincare ingredients, they basically say, don't do it. Don't use it while you're pregnant, and don't use it while you are breastfeeding. But I still stand by my glycolic acid suggestion. That was definitely an ingredient that I used a lot while I was pregnant, and you have to keep that one under 10%. Look for synthetic, fragrance-free. I hear people tell me all the time that they're like using this natural product, this organic product, and then I look and it's full of all these like ingredients that are fragrances. Fragrances can be very irritating for you and can be very toxic, so be aware of that. Oh, I want to punch myself in the face for saying that one. I used to fall for that. Here's the thing. Like, if you've been watching my videos, you've probably noticed that I get very upset when people talk about, like toxic ingredients, and I get kind of worked up over, like people referring to, organizations like the EWG as far as like getting their information about what is toxic for your health, especially when it comes to skincare. I feel like those types of organizations really prey on pregnant women. I feel like pregnant women are so susceptible to this information because we are so vulnerable while we're pregnant. We are growing a baby. Some of us experience health issues, and we We deal with so many issues just trying to get pregnant and then to have a healthy pregnancy. So when we start to hear all this information about what might have been causing these issues that led up to our pregnancy, or what could cause birth defects or cause any harm to our babies, we get so worried, and fear really takes hold of us. I think that is like one of the times of our lives where we're probably the most fearful of anything that we're using or eating or, you know, just touching, just anything we're exposing ourselves to. And so we are just so vulnerable, and it really pisses me off when I think back on myself being so vulnerable at the time, because now I look back and I'm like, why was I so ridiculous falling for this information? And I can tell you why. It's because something that is so precious to you, probably the most precious thing in your whole entire life, is dependent on you and your body and what you're doing to yourself. And so you're so vulnerable, and it really pisses me off to hear this and that. I was also repeating this information because it's not necessarily true. There are definitely ingredients to avoid, but as far as toxicity goes and everything, we need to really be careful about using these kinds of words. As far as avoiding synthetic fragrances or natural fragrances or anything, I think we all know now, it's all dependent on you. If you're allergic to fragrances, then definitely avoid them, right? If you know specifically those ingredients that you're allergic to that are parts of fragrances, then avoid them, right? If you're not sensitive to it at all, then don't worry about avoiding it. It's just like saying like you're gonna avoid peanuts even though you're not actually allergic to peanuts. Just to be precautionary, you're just gonna go ahead and avoid peanuts because, you know, people get allergic to peanuts sometimes, right? Like there's no need to do it. Yes, you can always develop some type of allergy to something, but you don't necessarily need to. I think something interesting that Dr. Lindsey Zubritsky pointed out is that during pregnancy, your skin can be more sensitive than usual. So then you might want to avoid fragrance because it can sometimes be more sensitizing in that way, but you know, it doesn't necessarily mean you need to, and it's not gonna be harmful to your actual baby. And I think that's like the most important thing to point out here. Some treatments that you have to avoid that really bum me out, but it makes complete sense that you have to avoid it. And actually, I start avoiding these treatments if I know I'm even starting to try to get pregnant. So the minute, you know, we're kind of like, let's get into this and do it, literally do it. Some of the dad jokes. Dad jokes, mom jokes, can they be mom jokes? Why do we always call it dad jokes? Because mom jokes are just as bad. Have to start avoiding these treatments because you don't want to risk it. One of those treatments being Botox. The irony is I've had comments on my videos over the past couple of months being like, Susan needs to chill on the Botox. And it's like, listen, I have been chilling on Botox for months, like at least 6 or 7 months. So I haven't had any Botox in my face for a little while, and you guys didn't even realize it. This is so true. I feel like I got so many comments about my Botox while pregnant when people didn't realize I was pregnant. And it's the irony there is that I actually wasn't doing Botox. I'm gonna go ahead and like listen to myself speak about filler really quick, and then I'll hop to some of the information that Dr. Jenny Liu and Dr. Zubritsky gave me. Same with fillers. Fillers can be, you know, just as bad for pregnancy. What really tends to happen is nobody really knows, right? Like I always go back to, they can't test on pregnant women. So what they do is they just warn you. They just kind of go with the, let's be cautious. Don't get Botox. Botox is a form of botulism. Botulism is really bad for babies. It can really harm them. It can be fatal for them, you know, to the point where even your infant, they won't let your infant have honey, which has sometimes botulism spores that don't affect at all a person who's an adult, but could affect a little baby under the age of 1. So you want to make sure you're avoiding botulism because it's one thing that you definitely don't want to have your baby encounter. So that's one. Botox, you have to avoid that while you're pregnant and breastfeeding. Fillers, you definitely want to avoid them. Again, it's, you know, you're injecting something into your skin. It tends to stay local, but you don't really know if it's getting into your bloodstream or anything like that. So you want to make sure that you're being careful. The other thing with these kinds of treatments is if you did get like an infection or something like that, that's really, really hard to treat while you're pregnant. You can't even do things like get, you know, ear piercings while you're pregnant. People won't do that for you because they don't want to risk the chance of infection because you really don't have very many options to treat your infection if something happens. Okay, I just said a whole bunch of stuff right there, and for the most part, actually a lot of it holds up. So back to the Botox conversation, neurotoxins, because we know that there are other brands out there of neurotoxins, but the most well-known brand is probably Botox. If you talk to a lot of doctors out there, they'll even tell you neurotoxins are very localized also. It's not necessarily getting into your entire bloodstream and all of that, because if it was, then that would be a little bit scary, right? They're not doing that. It's very localized. And also, you know, like I wouldn't want to put Botox in like one very specific area and then have it, you know, like risk it kind of like migrating to like my mouth and then having my mouth droop or something. That's stuff that you don't want. Obviously, like complications can always happen. I think that's like one of the big risks that you're taking when it comes to any kind of injectable. The same thing goes with your filler. You know, there aren't any of these studies. And I keep saying, you can't ethically test pregnant ladies, right? So you can't really get this information out there. And also, you know, like I'm calling it botulism, but it's actually made from the same bacteria that causes botulism. So it's not necessarily the same thing. Now, do I recommend getting Botox while you're pregnant? As far as my own personal experience, I avoided Botox while I was pregnant, both of my pregnancies, even though it's one of my favorite types of treatments to have done because you get the best, like quickest results from Botox. Dr. Jenny Liu points out, again, there are limited studies. It's unethical to test pregnant women on this. And a lot of the time this is an elective procedure. So there's, you know what I mean? Like you're kind of like choosing to do this for cosmetic reasons and it's not that important. Same thing goes with filler, right? So there's not a lot of information out there. You're injecting yourself no matter what. Even when you're not pregnant, you're always signing a little waiver saying that you are accepting that there could be complications with these treatments when you're getting them done. So when you're pregnant, you really don't want to take these kinds of chances. You know, I sounded pretty dramatic when I said there are like no treatments when you get infections and stuff. That is like such a lie. There are obviously treatments that you can use. And you know, like we even get things like C-sections and stuff done while we're pregnant because we just kind of have to, right? So they'll find their ways to treat you, but you just don't want to have to go through all of that because it becomes more complicated. All that said though, when it comes to breastfeeding, it's a little bit of a different story because again, the baby is out. And when you talk to some of these dermatologists, again, like Dr. Sam Ellis says on her social media, that she thinks that Botox while you are breastfeeding is totally fine. She's even done it for herself. She had actually even acknowledged in some of her Instagram stories that it's gonna be really hard to find any doctors that are going to actually give you Botox while you're breastfeeding if you tell them that you're breastfeeding, because they don't wanna take that chance, because why would they, right? Why would they take the chance for you, knowing that they can always get sued if something happens? So I think it's gonna be hard to find a doctor who will give you Botox while you're breastfeeding if you admit to them that you're breastfeeding, but technically it should be okay according to the doctors. All right, let's keep going and see what else I say in here. Also treatments, especially when you're going in for facials, it might not occur to you, but anything that's very electrical, I guess, is like the best way to group it all together. So high frequency treatments, any kind of laser treatment, any kind of microcurrent treatment, you wanna skip all of those. Again, you guys, if you did it once or something like that while you're pregnant, you know, it's probably fine, but they err on the side of caution. And it's because they don't really know what could happen, what the side effects of these treatments could be. And so when you go into pregnancy, you're just trying to be a little bit more cautious, a little bit more careful, and know that you're growing a human being. And so you're just trying to be careful. You know, I actually said this earlier in the video and I meant to really point that out again. You know, whenever like a person finds out that they're pregnant and they message me and they ask some of the things that they should be avoiding, and I say something like retinol, for instance, and then they freak out. They're like, oh my gosh, I was using retinol for like the past month and it turns out I'm like 2 months pregnant or something, or I got Botox and it turns out I was pregnant. And this is actually me speaking for the doctors. Definitely ask your doctors, and remember, I am not one. This is just like my own personal experience at this point. There's no need to freak out. Speak to your doctor about it. They're gonna probably tell you it's fine. As long as you stopped using it, it's probably fine. I think that's like the thing to remember. Like, don't freak out. You did not harm your baby. You're probably good. This is all just everybody being very, very overly cautious, right? So these are all just things to remember. As far as like Accutane, you're not going to be pregnant while you're on Accutane because there are so many strict rules about being on birth control and testing and like checking in with your doctor and everything. So, I mean, hopefully you'll not be pregnant while you're on Accutane, but that'd be like the only time I'd say like you should be really concerned about being pregnant. I wouldn't panic if you find out that you're pregnant and you've been pregnant for a little bit and you've been doing any of these things that we're saying to avoid. This is all precautionary. As far as all these treatments I was talking about, you know, Dr. Jenny Liu did point out that these are very targeted treatments, so they should technically be, some of them should technically be okay. That said, you know, I can tell you from my own personal experience, you're gonna have a really hard time finding a doctor or practitioner who was actually going to do any of these treatments on you while you are pregnant. You have to have probably like a pretty good relationship with your doctor, and they just kind of like know how you are and who you are, and you know, they trust you, because again, a lot of the time, like, why would these doctors take a chance for some kind of a cosmetic treatment for you when you say that you're pregnant? And there's always that little, even if it's a low risk, a little risk of anything happening. I think that's like the thing to remember. So even if one of your doctors tells you it's okay, it needs to really be the doctor that you're seeing that gives you the okay, right? So these are things to just also keep in mind. Not to mention, your skin is much more sensitive. I go back to the changes in your hormones. You are more prone to melasma. So if you're actually getting any of these harsh treatments, you could actually activate the melasma and make it worse in your skin. Your skin is also just really sensitive when you're pregnant. It's kind of funny because, you know, a product that you might have been using before you got pregnant, like a glycolic toner or something like that, might suddenly start stinging your skin. And it's just because your skin gets so much more sensitive while you're pregnant. As far as your skin sensitivity while pregnant, both Dr. Liu and Dr. Zubritsky agree, your skin is much more likely to be sensitive while pregnant, even though everyone has their own personal experiences. And that's just, again, due to the fluctuation in your hormones. Some other chemicals you want to avoid, the chemicals in teeth whitening products, you want to avoid those. You definitely don't want to go get a professional teeth whitening treatment because those are really strong chemicals that they use. You want to avoid dyeing your hair in the first trimester. They say, you know, the way to kind of get around that is you really just don't want the dye touching your scalp. If you're doing like highlights and stuff like that, you just got to tell your hair colorist, and a good hair colorist can avoid your scalp and just focus on the actual hair. So as far as dyeing your hair, this is one that I see come up all the time. Both Dr. Jenny Liu and Dr. Lindsey Zubritsky say that you can dye your hair while you're pregnant. And even Dr. Zubritsky points out that the ingredients found in semi-permanent and permanent hair dyes are not found to be highly toxic. So she says that it's probably fine, but she does also say to avoid it during the first trimester because it is the most crucial time for development of organs. One that's like a little bit, you know, I'm not really sure exactly why it is, but they say that you should avoid massage during your first trimester. First trimester, you know what, I think is where you want to try to just avoid everything, because this is when you're like growing every little bit of your child. It's like you're creating a brain, you're creating eyeballs. And I think that's why that's especially when people are like, be very, very careful about what you eat and what you're doing and what you're putting on and stuff. But first trimester, they say don't get massages. And then after that, when you do go get massages, go to somebody who's trained in pregnancy. There's been talks of like acupressure points that could maybe like stimulate your pregnancy and maybe like cause you to go into premature labor and stuff like that. I don't know how true that stuff is, but you also just want to be careful. You don't want to lay on your back after a certain point in your pregnancy because it can be really bad for the baby. It's uncomfortable for you. You want to be able to go to somebody who just really knows how to work with your body because you're just so much more sore and you need someone that's going to really help you when you're pregnant. All that stuff I still stand by. You want to, you know, again, when it's your first trimester, I think if there's any time to be the most, you know, conservative with anything that you're doing, it's probably the first trimester. That said, I know so many women, so many friends who were like, we were on vacation when I got pregnant and I was like wasted the entire time, you know, like you just have to make sure that you trust the process. Don't freak out. Go see your doctors, speak to your doctors about the things that you're doing, and obviously just be as safe as possible. But you know, something that my doctor pointed out to me during one of my pregnancies was that if mom isn't happy or isn't feeling well, then baby isn't feeling well. So I think that's also very true. That also leads to manicures and pedicures. I got manis, pedis. I recently got a manicure, actually a gel one, but you know, they say you want to avoid toxins and all that stuff. And you know, like what I always tell people, I'm not trying to freak you out. I feel like, you know, all the information out there is out there to really freak you out when you're a pregnant woman, especially when you're a first-time mom. And then when you look back on it, like your second time around, you're like, wow, I was being like ultra careful and I probably didn't need to. Here's the thing. I live in Los Angeles. It's one of the most polluted cities in the world. So I'm not necessarily breathing in the best air quality here. So, you know, I take all this messaging with a little grain of salt because listen, we're exposing ourselves to a lot of different things. I think it's really just being truly just trying to be careful. I mean, you don't have to go all natural and suddenly like be a big hippie and just like crunch it out, you know, everything has to be organic and stuff. That doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be better for your skin or for your hair, but you just want to be a little bit more careful with what you're putting into your body, what you're putting on your body, and what you're doing to it. I think during my second pregnancy, I was definitely a lot less stressed out, and I could already look back at my first pregnancy and think, wow, I was really overly stressed out over things that probably didn't matter at all. So it's always easier said than done. And I am telling you right now, if you're pregnant and watching this video and you're thinking like, this girl's like being so blasé about this, it's not that. I totally understand. I really do. Just remember that everything that's being told to you is meant to actually make you freak out. And also I point out like a lot of marketing, unfortunately, is made to make you feel worried and incite fear in you. And that's such a terrible way to market, because I feel like we just want information. You know, another thing they say is like self-tanners can be really bad for you because they're toxic and blah, 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 whatever. We found Vita Labrata when I was pregnant, and that one was supposed to be organic, a little bit more natural, non-toxic, and totally fine for pregnancy. So we went ahead and tried it. I'm not a big fan of self-tanner anyway, but you know, listen, wait it out your first trimester, go a little pasty for a second there, and then go to town, you know, like just look for clean ingredients. Don't necessarily look for organic and natural, look for clean. Oh my gosh, that was hilarious to hear myself say that, because first off, I love self-tanner now. I've become so obsessed. I think this happened over the pandemic. Over the last 2 years, I was stuck inside so much, and I really just felt so pasty and unhealthy that I wanted to have that glow. And so I really got into my self-tanners over the last couple of years. So now I love self-tanner. Second, I don't know where I got all this information that sunless tanners were bad for you. When it comes to spray tans, that's just one place where Dr. Lindsey Zubritsky says to maybe just be a little bit more cautious and avoid them, and that's because of inhalation. I think this is just like general information that's told to you that you're not allowed to use sunless tanners while you're pregnant, but I spoke to both Dr. Jenny Liu and Dr. Zubritsky, and they both said that DHA, which is the main ingredient in sunless tanners that causes that warmth to your skin, that tone to your skin, is generally safe for your pregnancy. Like, there's no information out there that says it's not safe for pregnancy. So I don't even know where I got this information, but this is the stuff that's out there. And you even heard me say to go with clean ingredients. So at this time, I was still really buying into this and thinking like, there's a difference between clean ingredients and like completely natural. So it just goes to show like that kind of information that's out there. I mean, we saw this with that documentary that came out not too long ago. I got so many DMs about talc, for instance, and other ingredients that you're supposedly not supposed to be using and that can cause all these health issues and stuff. All of this is just propaganda. It's kind of crazy that there aren't regulations on what people can say is actually like bad for you. Shouldn't there be proof? I don't know, it's crazy. And then the last one, you know, this is one of those that's like, use your best judgment. You never want to really overheat your body. My doctor said this to me my first pregnancy. He was like, when you work out, don't work out so hard that you're getting super, super hot. And he was telling me this about like my cycling classes and stuff. Don't let your body overheat. You don't want to do that. That can be really bad for the baby. So the same goes for like steam rooms and hot tubs and stuff. You want to be really careful. If you start feeling uncomfortably hot, that's not good. It's not good for you in general, but it's not good for the baby either. So you just want to be aware of doing things like that. Body wraps, anything that's going to make you overheat, you want to avoid that. So those are the ingredients and the treatments and all the fun stuff that you have to avoid while you're pregnant. But remember, at the end of the day, you're growing a beautiful little baby, and what matters most is that it's a healthy baby and that you're happy. And honestly, it's temporary. So get through it. You'll look beautiful after. And you know what? We're all in this together. So we're growing babies, making them healthy, and we can deal. I just want to put it out there. If you are pregnant, if you are breastfeeding, if you're trying to conceive, I feel for you. This is such an emotional time of your life, partially because of your hormones, but partially because it's such a happy and scary and wild time of your life. You're an adult and you like know so much about yourself and maybe even in your career and everything, but you actually know nothing about what to do when you're pregnant and when you have an actual baby, and they don't come with their own manual. So it's such a scary time in your life. Even listening to myself in my second pregnancy, where I felt like I was even more relaxed. I remember thinking that I was like so much more relaxed during my second pregnancy, and I'm listening to myself and I'm thinking, wow, even myself 3.5 years ago, I was still pretty worried, it sounds like. And I think it's warranted. I just want to point that out. I feel for you. I understand, you know, like solidarity, honestly, because I get it. And really, at the end of the day, trust your instincts, speak to your doctor, speak to more than one doctor if you feel like you need a second opinion, and just know that this is only temporary. It really is. It's like so weird to even think about myself being pregnant at this point, because it just feels so different now, right? So congratulations if you are pregnant. Congratulations if you had a baby. It's such a special time of your life, so just enjoy. And I hope that this video was helpful. You can obviously ask me questions in the comments below. I'm gonna leave actually videos from all of the doctors that I mentioned, Dr. Jenny Liu, Dr. Sam ELLIS, Dr. Lindsey Zubritsky. They all have pregnancy skincare videos out there, and they're very helpful. It was so eye-opening to hear them speak about their own pregnancies and what they were using. So I hope those those videos are also helpful. They'll be in the description box. You can also find them on Instagram. Dr. Jenny Lou and Dr. Sam Ellis are also here on YouTube, so I'm gonna leave all their information in the description box. I hope that you ask them some questions, you go find them. They're a wealth of knowledge and super, super helpful. It definitely has like really changed my perspective on everything. And though I'm not gonna get pregnant ever again, it's still a lot of great information for us to have out there. If you guys have any other questions, you can feel free to ask me in the comments below, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.